Hello and welcome to Making Better Habits. What habits do you want to make? What habits do you want to break? And I'm going to assume that if you're here, you probably have one of each of those, maybe a lot of each. If there's a habit you'd like to quit, if there's a habit you'd like to make stick, I invite you to drop it in the chat if you like, if you'd like to share. It can be anything big, small, personal, professional. I think we all have things we would like to do more of and things we'd like to do less of. As we're settling in, here's the invitation to get the most out of this time. So if you can, I know it's the middle of the workday, but if you can, I invite you to turn off your phone and turn off your email notifications or whatever it is that might distract you from the opportunity to spend this time fully focusing on yourself and your needs. It's so rare that we take that time to really give ourselves the gift of focusing just on ourselves for a little while. If you can, I invite you to stay through the end. You'll get the most out of it if you do. And I know life is messy, life is busy for a lot of us. So you will get an email with the link to the recording. So if you have to hop off, you'll be able to jump back in and catch anything you missed. If you want, you're welcome to switch off your camera. You are completely at choice about what allows you to focus more on yourself than worrying about fixing your face. I invite you to share in the chat, share your questions, share your experiences, talk with each other if you like. The only time I'll ask you not to do that is at the end. We're going to do a visualization, and I'd like you to just experience being fully in that instead of chatting. So let's jump right in. Who am I? I'm Colleen. I'm your host. I am a trained, experienced, certified coach. And part of the reason that habits are such an important topic to me as a coach is people often come to coaches because they'd like to make change in their lives. And what they can often find is they're fighting against deeply ingrained automated habits that have been there, and those neural pathways are deep, or they're having difficulty getting new habits to stick. So this is something that I've worked with clients on. I've also personally wrestled with my own habits that I'd like to make or break. So I am not some expert who is just going to sit here and pontificate. Um, I'm right there in the mess with you. So let's start with some why. Why do we even have such a thing as habits? Why is it hard to break them? Why can it be hard to make them? Your brain wants to simplify life by putting choices and actions on autopilot. If you needed to think about everything you do all day consciously, it would make life a lot more difficult. So, have you ever gotten home and not really remembered how you got there? It's because your brain knows how to get you to where you live. You don't need to be consciously thinking about now turn right, now turn left, now put the key in the lock. You can sort of put that on autopilot and free up the mental space to think about and do other things. But that's also why fighting a habit with willpower can feel like a losing battle, because you are resisting against something that's been put into your subconscious as this is an action we take. So, for example, if you've ever had a power outage at home, you walk into another room, you flip that light switch, even though your entire place is dark and intellectually you know nothing's going to happen, it's because that ingrained cue of when I walk into another room, I flip the switch is so deep that even though you knew nothing would happen, you do it anyway. This is how habits work. So how does it get there? Let's talk about the basic cookbook for creating a habit. And this can be a good habit, a bad habit, or anything in between. So first you experience a cue. You might also call it a trigger. You might also call it a stimulus. There's a thing that makes you take an action. And from that action, you get some kind of payoff. There's a reward that comes from taking the action. That reward tells your brain, aha, in the face of this cue, do this thing because there's cheese at the end of that maze, right? So here's an example. When I get anxious, I sometimes pick. Other people twist their hair, other people bite their nails. There are a lot of little nervous, fidgety things that people do when they feel anxiety. And one of the things it does is it provides a release valve for the anxiousness, but it also provides a distraction from whatever is prompting that anxiety. And so feeling that sense of relief cues my brain to think, when I'm anxious, do this thing because there was cheese in the maze. But it can also work with positive habits, right? So when I'm anxious and I want to burn off some of that energy, when I want to get rid of some of that uh, pent up anxiety, I can go to the gym. I can go for a walk. I can dance around my home office. And the reward is, I feel better because I burned off some of that anxiousness, which also gives that reward so that the next time I experience that cue, the reward has told me that's a good choice. Now, one of the problems with this is you may have ingrained this pattern when you were really young, or maybe when you didn't know what the full range of choices were available to you. So you made a, let's call it somewhat less than ideal action in the face of that cue, and you got a reward. Now it's automated, even though now, as the person you are today, you might make a different choice. So some of these are old actions, old rewards that you now get to lug around with you until you learn to change them, right? So sometimes it can be that you begin to crave the reward itself. So you may find that um, you don't even need the cue. So what's it going to take to make or break a habit? So if you want to start a new habit, sometimes we try and do it with brute force. Sometimes we try and do it through, if I was a good person, I would floss my teeth. If I was a good person, I would go to the gym. But we're not unlike a dog, right? We need to have a treat to motivate us. And we also need to have the cue that tells us it's time. Otherwise, you're spending all day thinking about, is this the time I should floss my teeth? Is this the time I should go to the gym? So you want to think about what's going to be the cue, and then what's going to be the reward. So here are a couple of examples. Like if I do my filing, I'll do it on Friday morning, and I'll have my favorite coffee. Your brain will start to associate the reward with taking that action. So it pairs good things happen when I do this thing, but you also have a prompt that helps you do it automatically instead of having to remind yourself, I should really take my vitamins, I should really do my filing. There's a thing called habit stacking, which is if you have a habit that's already well ingrained, you can attach a second habit to it. So what's that look like? So for example, every morning when I get up, I go and start the coffee. If you don't have to think about after I wake up, I go and start the coffee, you could say, as soon as I start my coffee, I'm going to do 10 jumping jacks. I'm going to take my multivitamin. I'm going to meditate. Whatever the association is, because you've already got habit A, you can start to tie habit B. When I brush my teeth, I floss. Okay. Now, conversely, if you want to quit an existing habit, you want to get curious about what's cueing it and what the reward is. So, without judging yourself or shaming yourself, just sort of be a detective to notice, am I feeling prompted to do this thing at specific times or in certain places, or when I feel tired or anxious or lonely or happy? And look for what the reward is. Do you feel a certain kind of way after you do that thing? So we just want to get data so that you can understand possibly what that relationship is. What's the prompt that leads to the behavior, and what's the payoff that you're getting? And so, why do we want to get curious? Well, because a lot of people try to make and break habits with this should energy. I should stop using my phone so much. Andrew, I'm totally with you on that. I'll even show you. Do I have it handy? Yes, I do. I bought this phone safe as a way to try and break the when I'm anxious, when I'm bored, I'm going to reach for my phone. So this should energy is often what people bring to trying to make or break a habit. And it's really hard because really that's just guilt and shame. That's not the treat that you're giving your dog to get them to do a trick. So if instead of I should check my phone less, if you get curious about why do you want to make or break the habit, how would you feel better? How would your life be better? Noticing that why can start to fuel something better than, well, because it makes me whatever, weak. It makes me a less productive person, whatever that should energy is. Start with your why. I'd like to go to the gym, not because I should, but because I'd like to feel strong or healthy. So one of the things we can do in making or breaking habits is think about speed bumps. So you've probably heard a suggestion before, like if you're powerless to resist cookies when you have them in the house, don't have cookies in the house. Now, that's not just about deprivation. It's about trying to take it out of your unconscious when I have cookies and I feel a craving, I go and eat cookies. You want to bring it into your conscious decision making. If I didn't have them near and easy, do I want a cookie badly enough to go get them or to make them? Or am I just responding to whatever that old cue is that tells me to eat a cookie that gives me this reward? If I take it off autopilot, if I bring it out into the open and look at it, now I actually don't want a cookie. Or maybe I do, but now I've given myself a little bit of space to make a conscious choice. So, what we want to do is with any habit that you'd like to break, try and give yourself a little bit of space with a speed bump. So, if you have a habit of you're always hitting the snooze button, you know, the tried and true is put your alarm clock on the other side of the room. I used to hear this advice a lot before phones and online shopping that if you're spending too much, freeze your credit card in a bowl of water. So if you want to use it, you need to take the time to go thaw it out. Doesn't really work when you can now just tap your phone. But the idea is slow it down. Do I want it badly enough to take that additional action? And the flip side, when you want to make a habit. So, for example, I had a client who got into a running habit because she wanted to go running in the morning and needed it to be really easy. So, before she went to bed at night, she put her running clothes and her running shoes and her uh, earbuds and her keys all together by her back door. So, all she had to do was go there, get dressed, and go out the door. She noticed that that same behavior that worked for her with running, she could adapt to finishing her book, which had been vexing her. So she got everything ready so that when she walked into her office, all she had to do was sit down and get started. So, what are the things that stop you from doing whatever the behavior you want? Try and reduce that friction. Can you make sure that if you want to eat more fruit, you always have fruit in the fridge? If you want to get more sleep, what is it that keeps you from going to bed at night? Do you need to turn off your phone sooner? Do you need to make your bedroom more inviting? So thinking about whatever those hurdles are, right? And so this is specifically with trying to break a habit. Noticing when you first feel the desire and starting to expand the time between when you feel the craving and when you take the action. So this is not even necessarily about I'm going to, by sheer force of will, not do it, but just see if you can start to put some space between the cue and the action. And notice what happens when you do that. Does the desire for the action get stronger? Does it change? Does it get weaker? Some people will notice, for example, if you feel a craving to reach for your phone, if you just notice it and allow, yep, I'm feeling that craving, it might pass in a minute or two. But we've got such a tight association with when I feel the craving, I grab for my phone, that we don't notice how long would that craving last if I didn't do anything about it. When you want to increase that distance, you can, for example, do some nice, long, slow, deep breathing while you're just acknowledging and allowing, yep, I'm feeling that feeling. I'm not judging it. I'm not calling it good or bad. I'm just going to deep breathe for 30 seconds or a minute and be curious. If you've been on any of my past webinars, you might have seen me demonstrate a thing called bilateral stimulation. So you can grab any object and pass it from side to side, back and forth across the center of your body. And try doing that for 30 seconds or a minute, just while you're being curious. What happens to this craving if I just notice it and get curious about it? What we're trying to do here is, instead of allowing it to be unconscious, we're bringing it out to examine it and to see if it's still the association you want to make when you experience that cue. Now, one of the things I've found beneficial when I get curious about this is if the desire remains. So I still want to fidget. I gave it I bought a fidget ring. So sometimes you can, when you get curious, if you notice, well, that craving's not going anywhere, can you give it something else? So for people who smoke, if they're trying to quit smoking, would it be helpful to have a sucker, have a toothpick, have a piece of candy, notice the craving, see if you can substitute something else when you notice it? But the first thing to do is to give yourself enough space so that you even have the opportunity to start making those conscious choices instead of just having it operate in the background. Okay? So let's try a visualization together on that topic. This idea that maybe there's another way to scratch your itch. Maybe that cue, action, reward that you've got on autopilot, maybe we can find another way to get your needs met. So I'll invite you to get yourself comfortable. And so for me, this means kind of sometimes wiggling into my chair, sometimes shaking out any tension that I might have. And if it feels comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes. And let's take a couple of nice, long, slow, deep breaths at whatever pace feels good to you. I invite you to extend that exhale if you like. And as you're breathing slowly, filling the lungs completely each time you do, and fully exhaling every time, I invite you to focus on relaxing your jaw and the back of your tongue. It's kind of a weirdly specific place to put your attention. It's not one we think about very often. But when we're tense, we'll often notice that we're clenching or that our jaw is tight. And so as you're breathing deeply, I invite you to release that jaw and release that tongue to help tell your nervous system that you're safe and you're comfortable. I'm going to count down from 10 to 1 while you continue to just relax into whatever position feels good to you. So we'll start with 10, 9, 8, relaxing in and settling into your space. 7, 6, that's right, just softening in. 5, 4, 3, fully relaxing, feeling comfortable and at ease. 2, 1. In this safe, relaxed, and comfortable place, I invite you to think about whatever that habit or behavior is that you might like to change. Call to mind just one change that you'd like to make, one behavior that doesn't feel like it serves you anymore. Now, whenever we're doing a behavior, there's a reason that we chose it at one point. We might not make that choice now, but there was probably at one point a positive intent, a reason that we did that. So I invite you to just ask your heart or your gut, just ask yourself, what's the positive intention in doing this action? What's the benefit that I get when I do this? And then I invite you to explore alternative ways to get this same need met. Allow your mind to generate other options, other possibilities that meet that need. We don't need to make that desire go away. We just need your clever, creative brain to come up with some other options. See if you might have a good alternative or two. And now imagine trying out one of those alternative ways in the future. Picture yourself getting that need met with this other choice, this other option that your clever, creative brain might imagine. Notice if that might feel satisfying to that desire. Now your unconscious is very clever at problem solving. And so you may notice that additional options come to you tonight as you're sleeping or when you're in the shower or when you're walking. Your unconscious may continue to noodle on this question of what other ways can I get my needs met? And so when those additional options come up, try playing with the same question. What might that feel like if I picture myself in the future choosing that action? What reward might it give me? Can it scratch that same itch? When you feel ready, You might feel like you'd like to wiggle your fingers. You might like to roll your shoulders. You might like to take a stretch. I often like to stretch after doing a visualization. It just feels especially good. And you can do this kind of visualization anytime, just picturing as you're getting curious about those habits you have. What's the reward I get? And can my clever, creative brain come up with other ways to get that need met? If you'd like to get additional help making or breaking habits, you can reach out and see if you might like to work with me one on one. We'll explore the habits, and instead of just bringing a should energy to I should do more, I should do less, or I should stop this, we'll look at why you want to do that habit in the first place, or why you want to break it, and what's getting in your way. What's stopping you from making or breaking that habit? We'll also look for what's worked for you in the past. And this is the tip I'll leave you with as we go. Whatever's worked for you in the past, we can often like repurpose that same habit for something else. If you notice what helped you, like my client, go running in the morning, maybe that can help you finish your book. Maybe that can help you um, any number of other habits, right? So I'll leave you with that. If you have any questions, any feedback, if you're struggling with a particular habit you'd like to make or break, if one of these tips is helpful, I'd love to hear from you. My email is right there, Colleen at newvinegrowing.com. Thanks so much for joining.